This is the web transcription service of the Royal Canadian Military Institute. On April the 27th, the Institute welcomed retired Lieutenant Colonel David Quick to our annual Member and Son evening. In the course of his career as a regular officer, he served in Bosnia, Kosovo, Haiti, and Afghanistan. He was wounded in a roadside bomb explosion in Afghanistan in 2007. Colonel Quick is one of only 18 people to have ever been awarded the Star of Military Valour, Canada's second highest decoration for valour, second only to the Victoria Cross. Colonel Quick.
So General Hayes, Colonel Hobbs, Ed, Mr. President, Dr. Lieutenant Commander Mike, ladies and gentlemen and guests, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And to the current serving members, not only of the Canadian Armed Forces, but our police services and our emergency services, thank you very much for your continued service in this country. I applaud you for standing the line. So I'm very unorthodox. So the presentation is 15 slides. About 10 of them are fluff. Within those 5 remaining slides, which are useful to you, I've embedded some video. Most of it is photos. My intent was to ensure that you had a couple glasses of wine before I started, because I'm much more interesting and funnier when you're drinking. So while we start this, I prefer if you continue to drink. I will comment to the young gentlemen in this room, who I've met some of them. I will show some graphic content, but it will not ruin your dinner, I promise you. It's to basically tell you a story through my lenses, and I need you to see it, and I need you to feel it. That's my intent to be here. I also will indicate, I've also done my research and realized you've had some pretty great people here. I saw the link when Colonel Mike Wright was here, and I know Mike very well. And so I sadly think you've drawn the short straw for tonight, and that's, again, not my problem, it's Ed's problem. But you couldn't have been blessed with greater leadership in this group having Mike here, and it's an honor to follow him, actually, in this place. So as I mentioned, look, my intent is to give you an emotional, visceral connection to my journey, because my journey is still in flight. And the idea is that, look, I had a little veteran clearly in the Afghan campaign as it applies to me, but I'm not a soldier anymore. So I need to kind of put that in context. And I also say thank you to this group of people for being so interested in soldiers and what you do for soldiers on a day-to-day basis just by being here. Because the soldiers in bases in Petawala and Gagetown and Shiloh and these little places that no one in the rest of the planet knows exist don't know there's people like you engaged in them, and it's very important. I do, I know that because I live here, but my job is to make sure the soldiers know we're here to help, okay? And you're doing that just by being here, so thank you very much. Okay, I also have an ability to not follow my script, okay, so bear with me. But I will give it a disclaimer. I have not told my story in about 3 years. And I made a conscious decision as I transitioned out of uniform to stay away from my old life. So I'm going to tell you things about my personal life that still make me uncomfortable. But I do it because I think it tells the story. And Ed asked me to tell my story, so I'll tell my story. And again, I appreciate your patience with me as I do that. That story has impacted every bit of my life. So, today is a good day to be in Toronto. This photo was taken last year when I was in the North Pole, on my way to the North Pole. So when I walked down the street this afternoon on my way here before I got soaked, there was people in cafes enjoying a nice beverage in this beautiful city, and I kept thinking, how did I get here? This is part of my journey. Okay, I will not follow a flow. It's going to be somewhat chronological, but I'm going to break out of it to provide context. I will speak to discourse because depending on who you are, I know this is a very educated group of people, the set of lenses that you choose to wear determines how you look at a problem. And so I will first indicate that soldiers are not Neanderthals or educated people. We spend a lot of time training soldiers to look at the world through a different set of lenses. But you take those lenses off and put a new set of lenses on, you see that same problem through a different vantage point, and which is very, very important for this discussion. I don't remember what I was thinking about there. I can tell you 100% that HR departments around the world were probably screaming my name and waiting for me to join the private sector, because I would probably be fired for what I just said in that photo. But that's okay. That was my story. So we're going to talk about why I'm here. There's a specific message you'll get. Who I was, return investment, because I'm a business guy now, and the so what. So I have a lot of little comments here. I'll build it up. I've already hit on point number one. Our soldiers, our Canadian soldiers, anybody who serves our country, is our return of investment. And that component is, we can't really put a point on it, but every effort we put into that investment will pay off in the long run. And I'm a product of that. So my generation was raised in a different era. I was raised to study the Russians, the Soviet bloc, to defend this country. And then I wound up in war, fighting insurgents that were actually drug addicts from not even that country. Okay, so it's this what's happened. But the investment in me as a human being, as a Canadian, I think paid off. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm still standing here. The third point is obviously about thanking you for being interested, and I said that in my opening remarks. I can't stress that enough. Because we're not killing people and soldiers aren't dying doesn't mean that their job is less important. In fact, I think it's the stuff you do when no one's watching or listening is probably more important. So this is a great opportunity to reflect on that and be thankful. So, as I mentioned, I'm not going to follow the order, but this is a part of my story.
An uninhabited polar desert.
Check it out. We're on the surface of the moon.
Felt like you had stepped into a completely different world.
12 recovering soldiers struggle against the odds.
A lot colder than I was expecting.
United on a quest to reach Canada's magnetic North Pole.
It's supposed to be tough, right?
This trek for all of us, you know, we're all going to leave our demons on the ice.
We're going to let it all out and let it die here and hopefully go home and a better person.
5 days. Traversing frozen ocean.
My biggest goal is to be able to reach that North Pole, unharmed, not with injury.
It's a test of resilience.
Once upon a time, we were soldiers. Today, you're polar explorers.
Skiing 125 kilometers in sub-zero Arctic conditions.
We're gonna make it, we're gonna make it.
Determined to conquer the trauma of war. At the top of the world.
Anything truly worth doing shouldn't be easy.
It's a long trek. That's a long trek.
And pluggers, if you haven't seen it, I ask you to watch that. It tells a great story of some injured soldiers that have, I think, overcome a lot. And it was a privilege to be with them. Okay, so here's my bio. And I look at it, I made it really black and white because I'm simple. Let me walk you through that. So in 1993 and a half, 1994, I joined the Canadian Armed Forces under the Officer Candidate Training Program, which was an uneducated officer corps. The intent at the time in the early 90s was to push into the fighting units officers that we were short to hold the line quickly as this country started deploying people into Croatia. We didn't have enough officers through the throughput. So I was selected to enter this program, 15 combat armed officers to join. And I graduated about a year later with 3 of us left. And it was pretty intense, and I learned a lot as a young man. But more importantly, I got to the battalion. And I started my career with the 1st Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment in mid-90s, where I actually met Colonel Dwayne Hobbs. Through our training, we've been friends for 20 plus years. He talks about relationships with people. And those relationships with people at the start of my career have not only held me together, but have made me successful, not just to this white page, but to the stuff that's not on there yet. And so I'm very pleased to have Dwayne here as a personal friend and brother for these years, because I've been a success, not because of what I have done, but because of the relationships that I've had with people. Okay? And I'm so pleased to see the RCMI's attention on your families, because that's really the core of what we do. Whether you're in the military or not, it's what keeps you strong. Following that time, I was an aide-de-camp. I did some divisional stuff here in Toronto. Shadowed a general, learned a lot about humility. And from that point, I had an opportunity to get my education, to complete my undergrad at the Royal Military College. Once I was completed that, I did my Staff College, War College prep stuff to be a company commander, and was sent to the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment, where I commanded my company, and I'll speak to that mostly in the presentation. After a successful period, and I had deployed by that point 4 times in 4 different countries. Again, very atypical at the time and space. As a young officer, I was already decorated with lots of experience, but it wasn't because of me, it was because of time and happenstance and the opportunity with my soldiers. So after I'd come home, I went to Staff College here in Toronto. I got my master's degree in psychology and studied the psychology of killing, which myself and the good doc spoke about over dinner, and went into the Special Forces Command, where initially as the Chief of Operations, the CHOPS for the Special Ops Regiment, and then later as the Chief of Operations, the J3 it's called, in CANSOFCOM itself, working for General Day. Once I was completed my time in the Special Forces world, I went into the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment, as Ed had mentioned, which was truly the way for a young officer in the infantry to end his career. Because in that period of time I was injured, and I'll speak to that. I knew my days were numbered, and I wanted to finish on top. So I finished my time, and I transitioned as a civilian, and here I am. In that period of time, I worked for an engineering firm in Arlington, Virginia. I finished my MBA at Ivy Business School. I led an expedition in the North Pole, and now I work in capital markets in Scotiabank. Okay, that slide is boring. These get better. I'll provide some color. So based on my exposure, I was an institutional guy. I supported the chain of command both up and down, which is really a skill set lacking in business. I was injured alongside my men, which gave me a little bit of street cred with the troops, but also allowed me to see the ugliness or the bowels of organizations that perhaps we don't provide enough attention to. And I had a very successful career. And you know, we joke with my friends because I was probably the loudest, most obnoxious one, and I seem to have a really polished career. So I think I stayed close to guys like Dwayne Hobbs and Paul Carroll, who's not here tonight, but so they just assume one of those guys were talking, and I could kind of skate through. So the key lesson for you young gentlemen in the room is have lots of friends that may make the same mistakes as you, and be unassuming and hide in their shadows, and you have a great career. Okay, so what? Look, I had 15 years of a 20-year career as an infantry officer in a battalion or a unit, which is atypical for officers, and I'm aware of that, which allowed me to understand the soldiers probably better than my peer group at the time, which is really on the shop floor. And as a result of that, I had a very tight link to not only who they were, but what they needed to do and what they wanted. And that's kind of that connection with people. And I'm very privileged to have that. But also, I'm quite aware that I have quite an extreme viewpoint on life through that set of lenses that I wear. And the set of lenses were shaped based on my experiences, okay, both positive and negative. But I'm also interested at the end of this to have a bit of an academic debate on whether or not we're doing the right things or not. Because now I'm a civilian, I can say whatever I want. The benefit of watching Mike Wright on YouTube is that he was still in uniform and he had to toe the party line. I don't have to. I report to no one but God and my 2 daughters. So it's easy. Easy day for me. Okay, so I went from this in Toronto a little while ago to this at the end, and now I'm here in front of you as a greasy banker. I use those two slides as good bookends, two pieces of bread on the sandwich that I'll show you, the meat of this presentation, which is really the shit of the shit sandwich. Again, young gentlemen, it's not stuff you haven't heard before, and ladies. I use dramatic for effect. So, I'm going to talk about this stuff and I'm going to walk you through it because I know that there's hyperbole about war and what we do in Afghanistan, what the soldiers have done in Afghanistan. I'll tell you my story from life in the trenches viewpoint, okay? So, let me christen the ground. So my time in Afghanistan is based on a 7-month window. Right? And it was based post-Op Medusa, which is infamous and it's incredible and it's in our history books forever. So I arrived on the ground as a young man with a team after the big show. It was all over. Fighting season was over, it's winter, everyone's hanging out. And it was miserable, like to live, dirty, and there was no fighting. So I thought, wow, boy, I'm lucky. Right? But I pretended like I was upset. Like, oh man, I wanted to get into it. But truthfully, I was like, good thing, because I'm going to suck at this. So, after we had gotten into this routine, and I'm going to walk you through it, I had to start thinking of things to do. Because we had a long road ahead of us, so we started patrolling. So my company was made up of 3 rifle platoons, a reconnaissance platoon, you know, your indirect fires, your FOO, artillery people. I had a Kandak, which was a battalion of Afghan army folks, and a bunch of media that seemed to flock to me, which is why you're going to have a bunch of stuff. So that group of us were living in strong points or really trench systems, using diesel to clean up after ourselves and you know, our bathroom routine, trip flares and wire, just like you'd see in the Great War movies. I thought, well, how did I get here? It's supposed to be this is supposed to be it. It was miserable. But we did it because we had to provide security to a road called Summit, which I'll show you on the map, which in essence was a pretty hard-fought piece of property. You hear terms of the Yellow School within the context of Op Medusa. It was in the middle of this hotbed. And so I lived on it. I sat on it, which again allowed me a very unique perspective. So by virtue of my very interest in not sitting around and my inability to sit still, we started looking around. We started sniffing around, learning our neighborhood, walking the streets. So the young gentleman in this room, you move into a new area, you go to visit your buddies, you want to go check out their neighborhood. Where's the park? What are the streets like? Where are the girls? Right? That's what I did. And we did that as a team. And we did that for a couple months. And in that 2-month period, we learned our neighborhood really well. And because we're professional soldiers, we wrote down stuff. We started mapping the neighborhood better than what we had on the map. Okay, which made us experts when eventually things changed. Okay, and I'll talk about that. Okay. So this is, I know you've heard of the Horn of Panjwai. The Horn of Panjwai is the bottom part of the screen that looks like a horn. Right? That's what they call it, the Horn of Panjwai. It's south of the Arghandab River. North of that is the Zari district, which is the birthplace of the Taliban. This area with the stars in it was my area of responsibility. And during the Op Medusa 1st Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment Battle Group's time, they had a battle group of soldiers in that space. And I inherited it with my company. So I was thankful that it was really quiet, right, because I was nervous. So that area was where I spent my time. So to provide context, it's about 10 kilometers west of Kandahar proper. And it sits on a river. Okay, fair enough. Now I'm going to walk you through what it looks like. Well, I will say, sorry, that every one of those red stars were deliberate, planned missions that my company had done. Okay, which is important. Within the context of that area where the red stars are, there were 21 different tribes. Okay? There were 7 different regions inside that square. And everybody living in that spot rented the land. So they were seasonal workers. Okay? So just think of the demographics of that group. Okay? It's an important piece for subsequent discussion. Okay, so this is what's going to look like. Another classic Army map. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. But truthfully, as I get on with my civilian life, I actually forget what things were called, so this is good. So this is what this part looks like. So I'm going to show you pictures of particular places in that zone that was my job. So there's a mountain area. It's one of my soldiers. Pretty awesome. Here is a agriculture area. This is a wheat field right in the middle of the desert. Okay? And for the young gentlemen in the crowd, there's irrigation, the Argandab River. And they're amazing with water. So that's how they grow crops. There's the river. This is at the end of the year. This is about July. It's still running. In the springtime, it's about a Class 2 rapid. And every time I walked through that, I thought I wish I had my kayak. Because there's great surfing holes, you can kayak that. And this would be a great tourist place if there wasn't so many arseholes there. This area here, extremely dense. In fact, the trees are so dense you have to wrap them with C4 explosive to knock them down. You burn a chain out of a chainsaw to cut one of those trees down. That area is one of the most terrifying places I've ever walked in my life. Over here, this area is a series of vineyards, again made with, in essence, mud, but you can see the agriculture area. So what does it look like? So the lines that go basically left to right on the screen are major supply routes, streets, major routes to go back and forth. So, Don Valley Parkway, 401, Highway 7. Okay? The circles and bubbles are basically the way that the breadbasket. So this could be everything north of Toronto before you get to Barrie, right? It's watermelons and poppy crops. Like this is the heart of agriculture. Okay? And then everything north of Highway 7, if you can think of the top one, is wide open desert, like you'd see in your mind's eye, okay, being a desert. But everything in that little spot that I inherited is terrible. Okay, terrible as an infantry guy with armored vehicles, so I got rid of my armored vehicles and I went on foot. And I'll talk you through that in a minute, okay? So, here's the area. You can kind of put that mental picture of the stuff I showed you. Here's what it looks like in relation to Toronto, okay? Roughly. So if there's anybody that's a mathematics person, or this is Dave's version. Okay, so this is what my area of responsibility looked like. So my company over 6 months did 24 delivered operations, one every 72 to 96 hours. It took about an hour to travel 1 kilometer on foot, covertly based on the terrain. And you've seen the terrain, so it's a lot of work. Mission would take about 12 to 14 hours. So we're only covering maybe 6 to 7 kilometers because you got to go one way and then you got to come out with all your equipment. And it's hot, so it's not fun. Okay, so if we did that from the downtown core to Highway 407, you can just imagine what we've done to our Canadian soldiers if they were here. Put their kit on them, make them walk to the 407 and tell them to kill some people. It's quite a challenge. So that's why I laid that up there. And Toronto is much easier to navigate than Zari District. Okay, so as I mentioned, I wanted to walk you through life in the trenches. And the reason why I say this is it's actually a testament to the soldiers that I was privileged to command. Because every single one of them did everything I asked them to do without a question. And I'm here to tell you the story because of them, not because of me. So let me show you a video on a real operation called Updragon. This occurred really in the central component of Zari District. It was an operation to actually hit a series of insurgents that were basically in the middle of that area. So we had to insert. We're going to enter, remember the north part of the 407 that I showed you in that big open desert? We're going to use the labs in essence as a decoy. The armored vehicles are going to go to the north. We're going to jump out of the back of those vehicles because you can't hide a 16-ton vehicle. It's really difficult. So we're going to make it known that we're driving. But as we drive, we're going to get out of the vehicle. And then we'll allow the vehicles just manned with drivers to go out in the desert and just do stuff all night. Because you can't trick somebody in their home country with a big green machine that you're not doing something. So we do something. So we go into the desert, and those vehicles would fire off their grenade launchers and make a big show, like a fireworks show. And while they did that, and all the enemy were watching, we'd sneak in by cover of darkness and surprise them. So what you're going to see is that initial setup. It's not a great video, but I'll walk you through it. And I'm going to take a 14-hour operation and make it in 9 minutes. Okay, so this is the perfect time. You can have a drink. I'll walk you through it. And again, I get way better when you're drinking. So let's do yourself a favor. Let's do me a favor, and just relax. Okay. As I mentioned, this is through the night vision goggles worn by a soldier. This actually is run by one of our combat cameramen and women who go into combat with a weapon when they don't use it, which is extraordinary. So we've entered in off the desert. We start entering into that agriculture area that I had shown you. You can see the nature of the terrain. These are not special forces. These are Canadian conventional infantry soldiers. You will see light on these. It's either because you're about to have a stroke. That's just a joke. Make sure you pay attention. Actually, the flashlights on the end of the weapons have an infrared filter. So through the night vision, you're going to see the infrared light. So here is a series of the wadis. So it's like bridging made out of dirt. So similar to something you'd see in a George Lucas film. Exists in this kind of terrain. These are vineyards. Our gentleman right there is named Tarek, a very brave Afghan interpreter who later died after I deployed home. And he's my escort. You see the antenna sticking up, that's me. And these gentlemen you see are my close protection team. And they put themselves between me and harm's way every time. So we have moved through the evening into the area that's center to the target. And now we're just waiting for 8 showers in the area at the time at which we're going to launch the attack. I should have my ballistic eyewear on. I got in trouble from my boss after he saw this, but ultimately I didn't care. Okay? So you can see the light. They're going to check out this grate pipe, just make sure there's nothing in it. And we're going to use this as a protection area for us. It's pretty neat though, when you see the technology at play. So next morning, the gig is up, and the gig is up. Okay? So what you don't see are the platoons now maneuvering, because this is company headquarters. And those are our soldiers engaging the target. So what I enjoy about these videos is the calmness of the soldier. Right? You don't hear the bravado. He's a bit of a psychopath, that guy.
Yeah, that was an RPG. You guys do that already?
My mother didn't know a lot of shit about that part. So what's happening ahead is the company is moving in subcomponents to entrap the enemy. And while they do that, we're letting them do their job. And then at this point, the company will
Right 400 Right 400
More local nationals right there.
That's our friendly artillery now.
Nobody's got a gun, man. Is that fucking AMP or what?
So these soldiers are determining whether or not they see
They have
an enemy
weapons.
or an Afghan soldier.
Weapons. Are
You
they
don't see
A&A?
them pulling the trigger and gunning people down.
Are they A&A?
No,
Are they?
A&A. Is it A&A?
Then your purse.
So he's yelling at the commander of the Afghan army to make sure that they're not getting away. But the point is, we're already engaged in combat. Soldiers are not just gunning people down and running the target. They're programmed, they're disciplined, they use proportionality of force to make sure they only engage where they have to, not everybody. It's an important message because it seems to get lost. So we've now, the company is now regrouping. There's other platoons forward.
What's that? Hey! Hey! What's up?
What did you spell out?
So there's no panic. We're in control of this. We control it from each hour onward. And now we're just going to reposition platoons to take down the target.
Second team. 3 to the left. Second team. Hey, coming or going? It's coming.
It's coming.
Who's in front of us on that side right now, sir?
You hear the crack thump. You can tell whether the round is coming in or going out.
Yeah, I see this one.
It's coming in. Those are coming in.
Goes meters.
So the other thing about this, you got company headquarters here fighting, right? This is got friendly when I was a young officer. You said you don't do that. That was taught to me by people who were never in combat. The company commander, the company sergeant major, the company medic, when you're in combat, must fight.
Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Hi, Levy! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1!
So that guy with the M72 is actually my signaler. Not school killer. The guy who's yelling at Lovey is actually my gunner in the lab, who also blew up with me. And his number 2 is my driver, now Sergeant Samar Galay. Every one of those guys in the company headquarters thought they were going to have a good go. Make some coffee for the company to hang out. They're extraordinary warriors. So now we can advance forward onto the position. You can see the bridge overhead. So the Taliban are cowards. They hide their injured or dead under things because they know we have unmanned aerial vehicles above. And so now the soldiers are going to administer first aid on this young kid, and we're going to extract it. And so the latter part of this mission now is one, we've cleared the objective, we're going to extract it for intelligence. The soldiers are going to do what they do best and take care of this young person and others that we have. And we're going to get out of there. As I mentioned, my company did this 24 times. After this one, there was another 23 times. And I didn't lose one Canadian soldier in any one of these operations. The other point here is you can see how stoic the soldiers are. They've been up since about midnight the night before, and they have been walking for 8 hours. Then they fought through a position.
Respiration is 20, SpO2 is 100.
And they're calm and cool, and then they got to walk out of there.
Gunshot wound right lower or
And so
right.
the night that I was injured, we did this, extracted, and then I was hit by a roadside bomb.
Did you come around here?
Extraordinary testimony.
Stop a second.
You can see that young Taliban is a teenager. So the young men in this room, you can see how tiny these people are. And as a Canadian soldier on the position, I actually felt quite sad to see these young men who were uneducated, right? Who were addicted to drugs. They didn't know any better. They weren't bad people. They were in bad lives. And they made bad decisions.
We got no guns.
Now that's actually an injured, that's a dead guy. We're going to bring him out. Because that's supposed to be the Why do I say that? Because I didn't learn that as a soldier. I learned that as a young boy in our school systems to respect everyone. I think that's what made soldiers in combat so great. And that's what nothing to do with the Army. Okay, so I do speak with a great deal of authority. I have dropped every ordnance that was available to me in combat. From 1,000-pound bombs to A-10 warhogs, and set my platoon commanders on fire. And I've done all kinds of ridiculous things which I wish I didn't. But I can tell you that stuff is not fun, and it speaks to the technology we have on the battlefield today. All right, so effects on the soldiers. So my company was exposed to a 25% casualty rate, and those are sports-related psychosocial injuries, right? So as I mentioned, I didn't have one soldier under my care die in combat, but I certainly broke a lot. So if we go back to the 400 of my combined arms team, it's roughly 100 over that 6-month period that I had broken or hurt. And that's about 100 families that I personally have affected in my life, in that role. Okay, that does not speak to them when they got home. And that's another point that I need to mention. So my own medic, Sir Davies, who certainly attempted suicide several times, the young woman that you saw in the clip, Miss Davies, Shauna Davies, went with me to the North Pole because her family was destroyed by virtue of the things that I had done. And she raised great profile to that, the stresses that they have in the family. Most recently, Lionel Desmond, who you may have seen in the news, who killed not only himself, but his wife, his child, and his mother. Was not the guy that I soldiered with. So I was injured on the 22nd of April 2007. 10 years on Saturday was my anniversary. And what comes out of that is a great deal of humility. So I have scarring on the left side of my brain. I've lost ligaments in my C-spine and thoracic spine. I have chronic pain, and I was kicked out of my profession. And I bled with my man, and I continue to bleed as a person because of the things that I had to do, but also the scars that they left. So I have a responsibility to keep pushing and making things better. And I will continue to fight. And I fought with them from the 23rd of April, 2007, to the day I hung up my skates on the 6th of June, and I gave up command of my battalion. Now, as a civilian, my job is to continue to fight alongside my friends, and I work in Scotiabank. So I have the same philosophy in the bank, and needless to say, it's not well received. I'm in the capital markets, so I don't care. However, the soldiers are real people, and we deserve to treat them like real people. Okay? They have a unique job, and I'm really proud to have seen it, but I think this group is a testament that you get it. And I'm so proud of you for being engaged. It's fantastic. The psychology of killing is something of an interest for me, because I think that if you look at who we are as Canadians and our value system, you can't easily apply that to combat today, in today's society with an education delta and views on gender. It doesn't work. So we need to put a little bit more effort in that. And we have to also measure what is mission success. Is it attriting the enemy? Is it holding ground? Or is it educating a population so they can read the Quran? So if they read the Quran, will it teach them that what they're doing is stupid? Yes, it will. But we have to teach them to read. So is that a place for soldiers? I don't know. Again, I think that's a discussion after this, and we're back in the mess. All right, so last piece, because my time is short. So how do you put something like this, this consecration of the colours with His Royal Highness Prince Philip, how do you put this on your CV? I'm in the middle, and you know what, probably one of the highest stress environments in my life, because he was pretty intense. Great way to end my military career, but that doesn't apply anywhere in business. But I would say to this group, there's all kinds of skill sets that that team in that picture brings today. And that organization of mission, my people, and then myself, can you imagine if that mantra in priority existed on Bay Street today? How powerful our banks would be. How non-existent would regulatory and compliance be in financial services? Because they own it, they live it. It baffles my mind. But I think we could do that. I think there's a bleeding of the two cultures. It's ready to happen. Now, we all carry our own bag of bricks or stones, whatever the analogy is, and I carry mine. But ultimately, you got to put those bags down and move forward. And certainly with my transition and my journey, I'm at that point, which is why I agreed to speak today. I'm done that. And truthfully, I had to remind myself some stuff because I've forgotten it. But it's time to start fresh and look at the way we need to focus in the future. And I don't want to see those mistakes happen again. So I'm an advocate of education. I'm also an advocate of teaching teaching our private sector, our counterparts, what it's like to be a soldier. Not to be a soldier, but what it feels like, the visceral connection. I also was a little bit offended that I had to go to the United States of America to get a job at a uniform. My first job was with a great firm in Arlington, Virginia, because corporate Canada wouldn't hire me. At that time, I was a 39-year-old post-command infantry battalion commander. With a master's degree, I spoke French. I had a pretty good career. But I couldn't get a job in Canada. And I found that offensive. So I went to the United States. They gave me a great job, and then I could transition into Canada, which is why I now work back in Canada. Because that's all I wanted to do, was work in my country. Just a job, like an average guy. We need to do a better job at that. And so I'm going to make sure I continue to help. I'm going to ask you to help me carry some of that load. So I'll give you all a brick from my bag, and I ask you to take that. Because the view, whether or not you're a soldier or a Boy Scout, you should never leave the campsite dirtier than you found it. And I'm going to continue to clean it while I'm here, and I ask you to do the same. Now, we can change the paradigm and change that set of lenses through education. So now I've shown you some stuff. Hopefully you've seen a lot of that stuff before. It's just a good revision. If you haven't, then I think we need to have more of a discussion. Now, can you imagine, as I said, an organization full of people that care about the people, to make those people better, to achieve your successes of your company, and at the back end of it, the return on contributions is based on the quality of that organization and everybody benefits. That would be awesome. So I wish I had a civilian version of the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment, because I'd make a lot of money, I'd have a really good team, we'd have a lot of fun. Sadly, it doesn't exist. So I'm going to cap it there because your wine glasses are empty, and I'm not Mike Wright, so I'm not as eloquent as him. So I'm going to leave it to questions, but I have to default to the head table because I'm actually not even sure of the protocol. So Ed, do I stop? Do I open the floor? What do you want me to do?
I think we should open the floor. I mean, very, very well done. It's the first time I've ever heard it speak, and I think it's probably the first time for a lot of us here we've really heard the truth of what it was all about. I mean, I think what David went through and how he led his troops was nothing more than spectacular. And in a very difficult terrain, as you mentioned about the drug abuse within the Taliban and things like that, must have been a very, very difficult thing to cope with. So ladies and gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you for your questions. Bruce.
David, thank you very much for that wonderful speech. Can you talk to us about the Afghanistan people? Like, I mean, you're fighting people at the same time in the same areas. There are people who are friendly to you and people who are opposed to you. And the Western media doesn't give us the mosaic of what's going on among these people and how they separate into these different groups.
Sure. So fair comment. So as I mentioned, listen, I was in a very unique space and time. Not a lot of team building, not a lot of bridge mending when I was there. My role was very specific. It was really about attrition. So, yeah, that was my company's modus operandi. I was to go into places and keep pressure on the Taliban to prevent them from influencing those major route systems. Because what I failed to mention was everything left of the slide was heading towards Iran. Everything right of the slide goes to Kandahar and into Pakistan. So it's a major trade route. And so we have to think about it as an economy. So when I arrived about 2 or 3 weeks before the poppy harvest, it was quiet because they wanted the crop to be finished so they could cultivate it and then get the opiate out of the country, which they did. And so there's all this, workers would come in, like we'd see in Brighton, for harvesting the apples. Like the same stuff we see here, that occurred. And then so you'd see busloads or truckloads of people coming in to harvest the fields. Okay? They then take the product and disappear with the product. 3 or 4 weeks later, come back in with the money, sort of getting rid of the money, with weapons and people to carry on with the campaign. So as an observer, I kept thinking, geez, I feel like I'm in Brighton, like Apple Fest. They're pumping out opiates. Then they come back in, where they pulled people off the streets or the impoverished areas, hooked them on some sort of opiate, and said, look, I'm going to give you a gun, a little villa, you just get high all you want, you just add pressure to anybody who looks like this guy, and they're like, perfect, I'm in. So it'd be interesting if we had that same response here in Canada. We'd have the same kind of people doing the same things. Because it's not like they're bad people, they just are sick. So the ebb and flow of the battle rhythm was based on an economic requirement. Get the crop, make some money, buy some guns, hire some people, do some bad shit. Crazy. So as an observer...
Was it the landowners you mentioned?
The landowners weren't even there. They just rented out to have someone harvest the fields.
Right.
They were all living in Kabul. So again, you almost think about the Muskokas or somewhere in Vancouver where you have all these owners that own stuff and don't live there. We should probably comment. We're not the same issue, but you can just imagine the fact that they're just people who have bought property and are using the property for their own needs, right? That's what I face.
But who are the Taliban? Like you said, they're in control of the poppy trade, is that right?
Yeah, so in my experience, the group that were in my area were really required the currency that area provided. It's holy ground as far as where the Taliban had originated.
So they extracted an economic rent off the...
Yeah, exactly. It's a revenue generator. So I went into the revenue generator and I was told to disrupt it. But interestingly enough, from a policy perspective, we were not authorized to eradicate poppy fields. That's not part of our international policy. So you just watch it happen, right? And that's just the way it is. So you observe it and then you put your gloves on and get ready for a hockey fight. That's basically what happened.
Are there any more questions? John, do you have any questions?
I have one actually for the Colonel. Since you left Afghanistan a number of years ago, and you were talking about education, and I totally agree with you. Part of the solution to the problem is to educate the uneducated. What steps, if any, have you seen or are aware of that's taken place that says that that's becoming a positive, not a negative?
Yeah, again, I'm a little outside of my lane. I purposely have stayed out of that discussion and any interest for a number of reasons. I would like to believe that internationally we've seen that that's probably the right thing to do. And the fact that we have young ladies that are going to school in Afghanistan, we put a lot of effort into protecting those kinds of schools. I think as far as I'm concerned, probably the most important thing the troops should be committed to doing. Again, this is Dave the civilian speaking. And I'm trying to not make eye contact with Colonel Dwayne over there, but truthfully, if we're going to do something and we're going to make them accountable, they need to be educated enough to do that. I think they're there. They're moving there. But let's look at the generation, right? It's a generational problem. And we have to have a conversation here. Are we as Canadians interested in committing to a generational change through education? When our own education system isn't to the level we want, right? And this, again, it's sad, but the reality is, what do you want to do? And I'm not the person, I'm not a politician to make that comment.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Sir, thank you very much.
Another Queen's Home.
NRCR.
It's a jumper.
Yeah, NRCR. I'm curious as to your opinion about now that you're back in civilian life and how your organization may be able to rally businesses and other groups around mental health. And within police and the military and other emergency services, what I find is when there's a myriad of different organizations that try to help out people that have suffered PTSD. What I find though is that there's so many different groups that there's not a collective group overseeing anything. And I think a lot of people fall through the cracks somehow because they filter from one group to another and almost they're, even within the groups themselves, there's infighting and competition to be able to help people their way, if that's the right way to say it. Is there a role for businesses, banks, corporate Canada, through CanadaCom or any of the other things that can rally organizations a little bit better into providing mental health better for our first responders and military? Is there a role for corporate Canada to do that?
Okay, so there's a lot in there.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
Let me tell you my view. So my first comment is, I never wanted government support for anything, right? I want my neighbors support, right? I belong to a neighborhood. I shovel my neighbor's driveway. That's where I live. What I prefer is the consciousness of our country to just accept it. Be educated with mental health is just an injury. Like a mental illness is just an injury, just like a lost limb. And we treat it in a serious manner and it will be healed. But it will be healed if the individual with the injury commits to the physiotherapy of their mind that they need to get better. So I'm also intolerant to people who don't want to get help, get fixed, just like if you lost limb, that's your responsibility. The second part is having people realize that that invisible wound exists and having faith that that's a real injury and having a health system to support them and giving them time to heal. So I actually don't want corporate Canada to do anything. I want them to see an individual with an injury just like they'd see a visible minority in the workplace, as they'd see someone who's missing a finger. There's no difference. And just say, okay, they need some special, they got a stand-up desk, they have to stand on a BOSU ball. I mean, look, I live in an office building. There's all kinds of crazy configurations people have got. Weird mice that you use for your computer. I can't even figure out. They're massive. Hey, that works for people. I see it the exact same way. And what I prefer is a educated, mature view in corporate Canada that says an injury is an injury is an injury, just like there should not be a gender bias in the workforce. So again, I'm just as emotional when it comes to paying you, young man, the same amount that you should make your counterpart in your class, who's a lady, and they should make the same amount of money. And if you had an injury, you should make the same amount of money as someone who doesn't have an injury because you're a value add to that industry. That's exactly what my view is. And as soon as we get rid of this competing organization, I could care less. You are part of the solution, or you're not my problem. Right? That's my view.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate what you said about not wanting the government's help, but when you say that that's the kind of job you had to go to the United States, that strikes me as rather shocking. Right? And I expect you're not alone in being able to say that, tell that tale. So I wonder, accepting that people have to find their own way in the world once they get out of the service, is there more that the country could be doing, or the government could be doing to assist people in transitioning to civilian life, in your view?
Yeah, so I have to remain politically or apolitical right now because I have an emotional connection to certain parties because of the things that they may have said or didn't do. I think if we can reshape the political fabric collectively, if we really wanted to make the government change, we'd make them change, right? Because they wouldn't be reelected. And we had almost a 10-year dynasty of things, and nobody changed anything. That's okay. That's what the Canadian public wanted. And I believe in democracy, and I bled for it. So I could blame the government, or I could blame Canada for not changing the government, or enforcing that through the government. But we have to be active. Like, we have to have a vote. And so I can't pass judgment on our political leaders because they put their hat in the ring and ran for office. One day, would like to take a run at that and try to fix it, but I am not the right guy today. So I'd rather fix the things I can. I think this group certainly can pick up a bat and swing harder than I can. And the influence that you make when you drop a pebble in that pond should make some changes. And I think my job is to continue to do those little things and affect the things that I can. So I don't want to be bitter towards the government. I had a great career. I'm happy to have those experiences. I think there's a ton of things we can make better, but I'm just focused on the stuff that I can.
Okay. Yes, in the back of the room.
Yeah, so do you have the impression that, it seems to me like you're talking a lot about tools that are being used to disrupt, I guess, a cycle that ends up in military action. Do you feel like that disruption is occurring in a sustainable way?
And in what context, sir?
Well, in the context of in these populations that are affected by these partnerships, do you feel like any kind of cycles of issues, the education, the long-term resolution of these issues is occurring in a sustainable way, and if not, that you see any tools or something like that?
Okay, fair. So this is where I actually would put a shout out for the Canadian Armed Forces. When you put a bunch of government agencies together in a room, the one who runs those organizations are generally people like Wayne Ops. Okay, so someone goes in and says, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm going to fix it. So in those organizations, or sort of those locations, you have a bunch of people with competing interests. It's all kind of nested within the government of Canada, as an example. You will find that a soldier or an officer will generally rise up and help stay accountable. The tools available are all those agencies in there, whether international or domestic. But I would say that it goes back to kind of how we were bringing people up, the future leaders, as the general indicated, is that the future leaders of our country are educated from the day they show up at school, like in our schools. And so you would see that whether we had the tool in place, the formal tool or not, a Canadian soldier will influence things through what they have, right? And so the structure, whether they leverage a humanitarian organization or another foreign force, you see that kind of that Jedi mind trick through the Canadian soldier. And so I would say that education is an easy day because people believe in it and get it. We put a lot of attention in that from a visceral, like a personal view. So I never, whether it was in Afghanistan or Haiti or Bosnia, it doesn't matter. Every Canadian soldier that went to a large meeting or had some influence brought up things like maybe we should just make people smarter. We don't have this problem, right? Because we're dealing with quite a broad spectrum in people, and the people who have the power are generally the educated ones, and the ones who don't have any power are uneducated. So you change the power balance by giving them a little bit of the magic, and they start questioning it and get equilibrium, which is sort of how our ebbs and flows of our democracy works. So I would tell you that whether I know of a formal structure or not, I would just tell you I have a lot of faith in the quality of our soldiers, that they actually change the dynamic by virtue of being there, whether that's their mandate or not. Okay.
Dwayne's got a question over here for you.
Trap Dave here. So your talk today was very focused on Canada, and you were pretty fast and loose about the years before that. And what I wanted to ask, because I think this is about the Army of the future and the next problem that we've got, but I want you to talk about all of those experiences in Bosnia or Kosovo or Haiti, everything that you did before that, and how that changed your performance, your perspective, and really the overall readiness of your organization to go to Kandahar. Because I'm certainly of the belief that our successes, as they were at the time in Kandahar, really originate from the fact that we had worked in a NATO construct before, that we've got all of this experience, and that you can't walk into Kandahar cold and get the same kind of success as limited or as tactical as it may have been without all of that stuff before. So can you talk about what that meant, the decade before Kandahar? How did that culminate in Kandahar?
Okay, so we didn't plant this, so good question. So this is the real deal. So that the generation before me had a limited operational experience, right? But they were trained by the warriors ahead of them. It was a sort of hand of the baton. And so the training system of which I was a part of, I think should be praised for their ability to train people for a war, not the war, right? This philosophical view. And so whether we were training for peace support operations or peacekeeping or some sort of hybrid within Haiti, the viewpoint was there's a pendulum that swings in the toolbox. You want to swing that thing out for hardcore, combat, and you want it to drop back into a place that deals with the floods in Winnipeg, right? You got this pendulum, of which I'm a product. And you can't do anything in between unless you've mastered that pendulum swing. So what they would do is they'd ratchet both ends on our training system to train us for war. And that line that we trained for was just as aggressive, different tactics, when I went to Bosnia in 1998, as it was in Kosovo in 1999, as it was in Haiti in 2004. Exact same training regime. exactly. They changed places, went to Wainwright, went to Gagetown. It doesn't matter. The same viewpoint, the same accountabilities for the leadership, the same training gateways, called different things, but it's the same stuff. Same stuff, right from the get-go. And the philosophy of the Combined Arms team, the view that none of us is as smart as all of us, these views that we are a collective, occurred right into the time we got to Canada. And so, to me, the successes of my time as a combat leader, as a young major, were not because I was a new breed. It's because I was trained by a whole bunch of professionals for a long time who had the same philosophy that we ended up inculcating in 2007. And there's a lot of discussion, I know, certainly when I went back to the battalion, about changing the battalion. I'm like, hold on a second. I'm going to train the battalion, a little bit more modernized. I'm going to have the same value system, the same core beliefs, because guess what? It was pretty effective in all kinds of different, the spectrum of combat. So as a new warrior at the time, like now I'm a veteran, but I think of the experience that I had, that spectrum allowed me to dial it up and down through my whole career. As a young man, I was 23 when I went to Bosnia, and I was 33 when I was a company commander. Like, a lot of stuff happened in 10 years. That spectrum never changed. And I could go up and down that spectrum every day, all day, because of that view. And as I transitioned to the New World Order, and we got out of Afghanistan, my argument was always the same. Continue to train the way you have been. You'll have a professional force, like a Swiss Army knife, that can do anything. But you have to ensure that people are held accountable. You need to be cruel to be kind, to be ruthless. Not because you're hard on the soldiers, but because you love them. And if you viewed that, this is kind of what it forged me in battle, was, look, you don't get paid to be a nice person when the repercussions of your bad decisions are body bags. So you be harsh about it, because it's an entity. It's just like on the trading floor. If someone loses a lot of money on the trading floor, they're not nice to each other. They're not nice at all. In fact, I've been sworn at more in Scotiabank in 1 year than I was in 20 years on the battlefield. That's a fact. So what is? Let's just have this professional discourse. So I would say to you, Dwayne, look, there's a lot of discussion and people go, oh, it's a new world order, a new soldier. Bullshit. You train them, you treat them like soldiers, like professionals, and they'll perform for you when you decide to put them in harm's way again. I'm an advocate, okay, of that. I don't believe in anything like that.
Understand. Are there any more questions on the floor? Bruce?
Dave, could you comment more on, you were trying to avoid it politically, so I'll ask you directly, on what should we do for the soldiers that are coming back with traumatic stress syndrome?
Oh boy.
I mean, is it...
Look, one is we have to make them believe that it's a real injury, okay? So the soldiers have to believe that it's okay. And that's a tough, it's not my place. The chain of command needs to make the soldiers realize it's okay to take a knee. And I can't do that, okay? The medical system they have in place, I think, is pretty good, okay? And it's sort of like voodoo magic, like people are learning about this. We've had a conversation, when you deal with the Great War and the impacts and the statistics that generate from shell shock or whatever they called it, are actually very similar to what we experience today. In fact, I had done analysis between my company and combating the statistics of the First World War, and there is a flow of combat and the influence on combat on the modern soldier, which is identical to what was experienced in the First World War.
Wow.
But when that soldier came back, the nation welcomed him back and
perhaps.
And treated him as a hero. Your guys are not getting that generally from the...
Well, look, you invited me to a very lovely dinner. You're treating me like a hero. And I would say that soldiers, for the most part, feel welcome.
Okay.
Right? We have a highway between Trenton and Toronto that the Army didn't do. The people of Ontario decided to do that. We are seeing, so I would say that maybe not to the big roaring fans and kisses in the streets in Toronto. We don't have that many people in the same mass. I would say, for the most part, Canadians are sympathetic and certainly welcoming of soldiers. I would like to see, though, it seen as a real, no bullshit injury that needs the attention, and not sympathy, but perhaps empathy, on ensuring that that person gets better. Because it's not about soldiers either. There's people in the private sector that have psychological injuries, and people are dismissive of that as well.
Right. In fact, you got an MBA from one of the best schools in Canada, couldn't get a job. And
I didn't have an MBA at that time.
Okay, but anyway.
But then it allowed me to get a job in Canada.
But, I mean, a guy coming back to private, who's got grade 12 or 11 or 12 and maybe in some military training, he's got a lot tougher road than you have.
Right, so my last question on here that I didn't get to because I was trying to keep it short was, let's use me as a case study, okay? I was one of the most successful lieutenant colonels at a particular time. I'm aware of that. Had a very blessed career. I left the military with a master's degree at 39 years old, post-command. I was like 5 years younger than my peer group. I had a flawless military record. Could not get a job. So to your point, what happens if you're like a good person who just didn't have that benefit? What would they do? That's a good question. I have no idea to answer that. That's a problem for me. And so I think there's a way to translate. This is a bilingualism. How do we communicate the value system and the work ethic and the quality of a soldier into the private sector? Well, one, there's a little bit of faith that has to go with it. My job was to go to business school to speak business, to translate what I had in my head to something that people would get. That was my job because I was coming at a different spot. But it's a very difficult conversation, and I don't have the answer for you, except for talking about that makes the difference. Because 10 years ago, nobody talked about it. They didn't care. It's just some dumb soldier. Whatever, he'll become a plumber. What? Hold on a second. These are people who are accountable, like a young soldier in a leadership role. So think about this. So there's doctors in here, there's a couple of lawyers. So think of having 10 reports, direct reports. Okay, so a young Section 2 IC. This kid's like 23, 24 years old. 10 direct reports responsible for their lives. Okay? There's managing directors in the bank making 7 digits who've never had 10 reports. It blows my mind. And that young corporal who's a young leader gets paid, I don't know, $40,000 a year. He loses a leg, it's worth $250,000 a year. Sorry, $250,000 like cash. That's it. That's what your leg's worth. That doesn't make any sense to me. So we have to figure out how do we translate that into business speak, give them career paths that they have value in and they feel good about where they're going, and then set them loose. Because what I found is soldiers, once you get them motivated and get them on that line of departure, they're waiting for you to let go. Let them go and let them do their business. So my view is our job is to get these soldiers transitioning to the line of departure, well equipped, well trained, with the direction they need to go, and they're waiting for your whistle blast. Once you let them go, watch what they can do. We haven't done that yet. So that's why I ended like that. Wow. I need you to own it, so that when we whistle blow, they take charge and we all benefit, right? They own our businesses, they make us money, they take care of our kids, they educate us. Awesome. How awesome is that? Okay?
Well done. Well done. Yeah, question in the back there.
One question, and that is, looking at your post-military career, what did the Bank of Nova Scotia know that nobody else knew and nobody else recognized? Because it seems to put them in a league above everybody else as an employer.
Well, that's our plan. We're going to knock down Royal Bank. No, so look, Scotiabank. Look, to be fair, Scotiabank sponsored the expedition, so they were the prime sponsor for me, and this is why I support TPL. Right? I gave a presentation. I met some individuals at TPL. They asked me to lead an expedition. I said, sure, I'm unemployed. Love to do that. I hate the Arctic, but I'll do it. Because I had been there before and it sucked the second time. Because I thought the cause was good. Scotia sponsored it. I gave a presentation there. I met the CEO there. We got along well. And it wasn't at the time I got a job offer. It was later once I went to business school. I called him back and said, I want to work in your bank and I can do this because I'd gone to school with a bunch of bankers. And I'm like, you don't provide anything that I don't. In fact, I know other things you don't, so let me give it a go. So the bank was receptive when I could talk their language. So part of this is not about us learning soldier speak. We have to convince the soldiers to become bilingual so they can translate their value proposition. What do they bring to you? And once we do that, this is not charity. You're just giving them equal opportunity, and they will perform by virtue of their skill sets. That, to me, is a win-win. I didn't have that. Scotia just gave me the door open, and I kicked it down and said I went in. So I don't know what I'm going to do. We'll figure that out. But ultimately, I got a job. But Scotia will bring down Royal Bank. So we'll
This has been another in the ongoing series of podcasts brought to you as an educational service of the Royal Canadian Military Institute. You can keep abreast of our web offerings as well as our live events by visiting our website at www.rcmi.org. Once again, this is Eric Morse saying thank you for being with us and good night.